All right. Hope everybody's doing well. Today we are going to continue with slope intercept form. Okay. So this is graphing from slope intercept form. Okay. So look back at yesterday. Okay. We had equations and we found the slope and the y-intercept because they were in slope intercept form. Reminding you, slope intercept form is y equals mx plus b. This m represents what? The slope, and the b represents the y-intercept. Okay? So yesterday we had a pretty easy time as far as identifying what the slope and the y-intercept were. So if we have an equation, let's say something like this. Y equals 2/3 x plus 2. Okay? What can we identify first? The slope, which is the m. Remember, that's this portion right here. What is the slope of this? 2/3. Good. And what is the y-intercept? That y-intercept is this area. And that's a positive 2. So we're just going to write y-intercept equals 2. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take this information and we're going to use that to graph. Okay? When you graph, right, this is important. Please make sure you write this down. When graphing from slope intercept graph the y-intercept first. Okay, now think about what a y-intercept means. That's where this line, when we graph it, crosses the y-axis. Okay, so let's go back. Let's look at our graph. Okay, and our y-intercept, oops. Okay, so our y-intercept from our equation that we just did was 2. And you have to graph this first. Okay, so remember, this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis, and we're going to go, remember, this is where this line is crossing the y-axis, and if it's at 2, well, that's a positive 2, right? So we're going to start here, and we're going to go up 1, 2. We're going to put a point right there, okay? We've graphed the first part of this line. Now, let's go back and look at our equation. Our slope is 2/3. Now, when you graph slope, you graph the slope from, not the origin, but from the y-intercept. Okay, so let's go to where we found our y-intercept, okay, which is right here. Now, slope, if you remember, when we found slope, the top number is how much it changes in y. It's up or down. The bottom number is left or right. So, according to this, I'm going to go up 2. They're both positive, right? So up is positive and right is positive, and I'm going to go right 3. So from here, go up 2, 1, 2, and then right 3, 1, 2, 3. Then I will put my second point, and I will draw my line through those points. Okay, does that make some kind of sense to you guys? Okay, not that difficult. All right, let's take a look at another equation. Okay, we'll have a negative one. Okay, so if I have y equals negative 1/3 x minus 4. Okay, let's first identify the slope and the y-intercept. What's the slope here? Negative 1/3. My y-intercept is, remember, include the sign in front of it, negative 4. Okay, so let's go to our graph. We have a y-intercept of negative 4 and a slope of negative 1/3. Now, let's go back to this. Whenever we graph slope that's negative, okay, and this is important, when slope is negative, make only the top number the negative. Okay. Obviously, they're not going to both be negative because if they're both be negative, that would be positive slope. Okay. And it's not going to be wrong necessarily if you make the bottom number negative, but it's just a good rule of thumb to keep that negative on the top. Okay. So if we have a slope of negative 1/3, we're going to graph this. Remember, keep negative on top as -1/3. Okay. So let's go back and look at our slope. We're going to cross this out and make this -1/3. Now, remember, what do we graph first? We graph the y-intercept, which is right here. So we're going to go down 4. A common mistake made here is going right here. Okay, yes, this is -4, but this is not -4 on the y-axis. This would be -4 on what? The x-axis. Okay, make sure y-intercept. Okay, so we're going to go down 4. Put our point. Okay, we've done this. Now we're going to graph our slope from, and remember, it's very, very important. You don't graph the slope from the origin, you graph from the y-intercept. So this is telling me that I'm going to go down 1 and where? Right 3. So from here, I'm going to go down 1, right 3, and my line is going to go just like that. Okay? It's not that hard. Hopefully this makes some sense to you guys. Okay. All right, let's take a look. If I have let's say I've got one like this, okay? Y equals -x plus 2. Okay. Now remember, yesterday, when we talked about having a slope that's just a negative number without a coefficient, what's the value of it? 1. So if I have a negative sign, my slope is actually going to be -1/1, which I'm going to rewrite as -1/1, because that's how I want to graph it. All right, let's go ahead and graph this one real quick. Okay, we had a y-intercept of 2 and a slope of -1/1. So let's go up 2, put our point. From there, we're going to go down 1/1. That's what that line's going to look like. Okay, this first part is pretty simple. Okay, now let me show you what we're going to do on the next part. This is a little bit tricky, but not too bad. If I have an equation that looks like this, let's say I've got -2x minus 3y, and that equals, let's say, 9. Okay? Well, what's wrong with this equation? This equation is not in slope-intercept form. Okay? For several reasons. Number one, I got an x over here. Number two, I have a coefficient in front of my y. So I need to make this look like this. Okay? So what I need to do first is get this x onto the other side. So remember, whenever I have a variable that's on the wrong side, I can move it to the other side by adding or subtracting one side and doing the same thing to the other. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add 2x here, and I'm going to add 2x here. Now, I want the x to come before this number that's by itself. So when I rewrite this next step, I'm going to have -3y equals this 2x plus 9. Okay? Now we're a little bit closer. At least we've got our y's and x's on the right side. The next thing I need to do is get this y completely by itself. Well, what's happening to this y? It's being multiplied by -3. So the way that I undo multiplying by -3 is to divide everything by -3. Well, these cancel, don't they? So I'm left with y, which is good. That's what I want. 2 and -3, I can't do that. They don't divide. So I'm just going to write that as -2/3 x. Now, what's 9 divided by -3? That's -3. So now I have this equation, and it is in this form. I'm good to go. I can graph. What's my y-intercept? -3. And what's my slope? -2/3. But I'm going to make that negative on the top. So this slope is going to be -2/3. Okay, let's go back to our graph. Let's see. Y-intercept is -3. And my slope was -2/3. So the first thing I'm going to do is graph my y-intercept, which is -3. Remember, y-axis, x-axis. And I'm not going to go up 3 because this is a negative. I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put my point. my slope is going to be down 2, right 3. And the reason it's down is because this is negative. So from here, not from the origin, from here, I'm going to go down 2 over 3. Then I'm going to put my line through that. Okay? Pretty easy stuff. Okay? You should be able to transform the ones that are not in slope intercept form, okay, that look like this, and this is actually what we call standard form. You can transform those into slope intercept form and then graph. All right? If you need to watch this again, by all means, my substitute teacher would be happy to show you again, or slow it down, or pause it, rewind it, whatever you need to do. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. God bless you guys, and you'll get your assignment now. I'll talk to you soon.